Hi, sixth graders. Okay, today we are going to be learning about ratio tables and what are ratio tables. In our last lesson, we looked at what ratios were, and we saw that they are a comparison of two or more quantities. We also saw that there were several different ways in which you could write ratios. Then we talked about how to make them equivalent. So we looked at making ratios equivalent by making sure that they have the same multiplier, or we call this a multiplicative relationship. Woo, try saying that 5 times fast. Okay, we're going to learn a little bit more about multiplicative relationships today. And we're going to be looking at ratio tables. So, a ratio table is a place where we can organize our ratios. So, a ratio table is a way to organize. It's a way to organize and find equivalent ratios. Equivalent ratios. There we go. All right, so a ratio table is a way to organize and find equivalent ratios. So we are going to be using ratio tables today to organize data and to see if ratios are equivalent. So let's look first at a ratio table. So a ratio table looks something like this. It has a box. And in the box, we put the data. So let's talk about frogs and toads. Okay, so let's talk about frogs and toads. So if we were comparing frogs and toads, we would use a ratio table to organize our information. So let's say that we had 4 frogs and 6 toads. So for every 4 frogs that we have 6 toads. This right here is our initial ratio. So our initial ratio is 4 to 6. You take the 4 and the 6, and instead of them being a fraction, because look, if you just get rid of this, it's a fraction, and you put them side by side with the dots, and that gives us a ratio. So our first ratio is 4 to 6. Now, in this ratio table, they will give us other quantities, and we have to fill in which quantity goes where using a 4 to 6 ratio. Like, for example, let's say that they give us 20 frogs, and we don't know how many toads there are. We can use this ratio of 4 to 6 to solve for the missing information. We can do this either by using multiplication or division. We call this the multiplicative relationship because we're going to see what's the relationship between 4 and 20 when I multiply. So I can work backwards and say 20 divided by 4, or I can multiply forward and say 4 times what gives me 20. Well, let's say I'm going from 4 to 20. What caused us to get from 4 to 20? Well, Well, we know that when we multiply 4 by something, it gives us 20. What is the something? Well, we know 4 times 5. 4 times 5 gives us 20. So 4 times 5 equals 20. So equivalent ratios happen when we do the same thing to the bottom. So if I multiplied by 5 here, on the bottom, I would need to multiply by 5. So this one becomes 6 times 5 to give us an equivalent ratio. And we know that 6 times 5 is 30. So 20 over 30 is an equivalent ratio to 4 over 6. Well, what if I know how many toads there are? So let's say I have 90 toads. I need to know, how did I get from 6 to 90? So I can find the multiplicative ratio of going from 6 to 90 by asking myself, 6 times what equals 90? Now, if I'm not able to do that in my head, I could also say 90 divided by 6, because the multiplicative relationship lets us use division forward or backwards. Okay, so once we know how to get from 6 to 90, we can then figure out how to get from 4 to what goes on the top. So we know that 6 times something gives us 90. Well, I know that if I do the number 15, I will get to 90. So I'm going to put 15 here. 15 becomes the multiplier, because when I do 6 times 15, I get 90. So if I multiply by 15 here, on the top, I need to multiply by 15. So I get 15, 30, 45, and 60. So when I have 4 to 6 and I multiply by 15 as my relationship, my change causes 60 frogs. 60 frogs! That's a lot of frogs. Okay, now how do I get from 4 to 120? So this one I did 4 by 15, and that gave me 60 frogs. So if I do toads, and I'm trying to figure out how to get from frogs to 120, and 6 toads to what goes here, I can do 120 divided by 4, and that gives me 4 into 12 is 3, and 4 into nothing is nothing, 30. So my multiplier from 4 to 120, I had to multiply by 30. And 30 times 4 gives me 120. So I get 120 frogs. Well, if I multiplied by 30 on the top for this box, I have to multiply by 30 on the bottom for this one. And I know that 6 times 30, there's my 30 right here, gives me 180, because 6 times 8 is 6 times 3 is 18, plus a 0, that's 180. All right, let's do another one together. In this ratio table, we are going to compare triangles to sides. So triangles, oh, that pen is toast. Okay, ready? triangles, two sides. So triangles, two sides. Okay, there we go. All right, and this one, my original ratio is 1 to 3. And then they say, what happens when we have 2, 9, and 4. Okay, so we want to know how many triangles do I have with matching sides. So if I have one triangle, it means that I have 3 sides. So if I go from 1 to 2, what was my change? Well, in order to get from 1 to 2, my multiplicative relationship, I cannot say that word today, is times 2. So if I multiply by 2 on the top, I also need to multiply by 2 on the bottom. So 3 times 2 gives us 6. Now, on the bottom, for this one, it says 9 sides. So how many triangles do I have when I have 9 sides? Well, to get from 3 to 9, always going back to that original ratio, to get from 3 to 9, I had to multiply by 3. So on the top, then, to fill in this hole, I need to multiply by 3. Well, 1 times 3 is 3. Okay, and then in the last one on this table, when I have 4, to get from 1 all the way over here to 4, I had to multiply by 4. So that means that on the bottom, I also need to multiply by 4. So 3 times 4 is 12. So when I have 4 triangles, I will have 12 sides. Whew, that was a lot. Okay, now it is time for you to do a try it. So let's go ahead and do a try it. We are going to do miles. We're comparing miles and hours. Okay, so we're going to compare miles and hours. And I would like for you to please fill in the holes with the appropriate equivalent ratio when we have an original ratio of 4 to 8 and there's a missing one there when we have 6 hours, 24, and 96. Ooh, we're getting fancy there. Okay, hit pause so you don't hear me solving this problem. And then when you're ready, come on back. All right, so my original ratio is 4 to 8. Well, oh my gosh, it's not 4 to 8. I read wrong, you guys. It's supposed to be 3. Oh no. Well, you could do 4 to 8 and just figure out how you got to 6, but that's just really crazy. I'm so sorry. This should have been 3, and now you probably tried to figure that out and mess the whole thing up. I'm so sorry. Ah, Miss Englander. Okay, so to get from 3 to 6, I multiplied by 2. On the top, I have to then multiply by 2. So right now, if you just hit pause and then redo it with a ratio of 4 to 3. I'm sorry. Okay, so 4 times 2 gives me 8. So 8 to 6 is this box right here. So this box, the answer is 8. That's where I got the 8. I'm so sorry. Okay, now how do I get from 4 all the way to 24? Well, I know that 24 divided by 8 gives me, 24 divided by 6, what is it with this number 8 today, you guys? My goodness, times 6, right? So if I multiply by 6, I get 24. So on the bottom, I also am going to multiply by 6, and that gives me an answer of 18. So the very last one I have is right here. So I can solve this one. I can solve this one by going 96 divided by 4 because my multiplicative relationship goes from this 4 here to this 96. So 4 times 2 gives me 8. I have 1 and I drop down my 6. And I know that 4 can go into 16 4 times. So my multiplier is 24. So to get from 3 all the way over to here, I have to multiply by 24 because I multiplied by 24. So I know 24 times 3 gives me 12, carry the 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7, and it gives me 72. So my answers are 8, 18, and 72. All right, so those are ratio tables. Now we can take these answers and we can turn them all into ratios. So I'm going to just come back up here and show you now how to turn these into ratios. All you do is you read it from the table. So 4 to 6, this one then would be 20 to 30. Or you could write it as 20 to 30 or 20 over 30. On the next one, this one right here, this relationship is a ratio of 60 to 90, or 60 to 90, or 60 over 90. And this one, 120 to 180. That's all you do. Down here, if I wanted to turn each of these into ratios, I would just pull them right out of the table. This one is a ratio of 1 to 3, 2 to 6, and 3 to 9, 4 to 12. You're just pulling it right out of the table. All right, you guys, go ahead and answer your essential question. What are ratio tables? Answer that. Why do we use ratio tables? Like, what's the point of a ratio table? Why do we need it, and what is it? And then, out of 3, put your rating in the box. 1, I have no clue what you did there. You just made a bunch of rainbows, Missy Blender. 2, I'm kind of starting to understand this. I'm definitely going to have some more practice with it. Or 3, I totally understand how to make equivalent ratios going from the first one and using multiplication to get to the missing number. All right, and right now, if you have any questions, go back to Google Classroom, ask me, or you may head on over and do your practice work. Thank you so much for your hard work, and as always, make it a great day the Cougar way.